Have you ever wondered how deep tech companies actually start? Well, we were too.
So in this podcast, we'll be interviewing scientists and entrepreneurs that have taken their ideas out of the lab and turned them into startups. I'm Antonia.
And I'm Christina, and this is Startup the Science.
This podcast is brought to you by INAM Berlin, the Innovation Network for Advanced Materials, bringing together the brightest minds in material science. Visit us at inam.berlin.
On today's episode of Startup the Science, we're talking to Dominic Roth. He is the CEO and co-founder of Stenon, a really cool Agritech startup from right here in Germany.
We're very excited to have you, and we're looking forward to hearing more about your startup and the very interesting things that you guys do. So maybe we'll start with that. If you want to tell us a bit more about Stenon and how it all started.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be on your podcast. So what we are doing at Stenon is that we have developed a technology to enable soil analysis in real time. And why should anyone care about that? So basically, soil analysis is a very fundamental step in agriculture, meaning that basically everything that is based on the steps behind that, meaning that fertilization, putting out the seeds, irrigation. So all of that is basically based on the soil analysis. And that is currently happening via extracting a physical sample out of the ground and basically sending that into a laboratory to be analyzed. And then this report is ultimately sent back to a farmer. And all of this can take up to 8 weeks, sometimes even 12 weeks. Whereas the farmer is actually very limited in when he can act based on the legislation that is happening in Germany. And we basically cut off all of this and give him a really smart device into his hand that he just sticks into his ground, pushes the button, and gets the same result that you would get from a laboratory, but just immediately. And based on that, we're enabling services, meaning that we actually help him make the right decisions, put on the right amount of fertilizer in the right space, to increase his harvest results, increase his soil health, and be within the legal limits. So this is what we do in short.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very cool. I mean, I have to admit, I don't know so much about agriculture, but I remember the first time we met and you showed me this device, and I thought it probably is very impressive. And if I were a farmer, or if I think of the farmers that I've met throughout my life, I can imagine it makes their life a lot easier. So I wanted to ask you, how come something like this, or has something like this already been developed? Is this market somewhat competitive, or is the only way for farmers now to get the soil analysis to send their samples to a lab and then wait for 8 weeks?
So currently, as a valid method, sending into a laboratory is really the only way. But the market for technologies to analyze soil in real time or producing other methods to do that is becoming increasingly competitive, I would say. The issue with that is really that soil is one of the most complex organisms on Earth, which makes it extremely hard to create a technology around it and to be able to create a measurement that is really on a level of a laboratory. Because in the end, this is what you need, because if you base your steps that you take on top of these results, they better be accurate. Otherwise, you can risk your whole harvest, and this is not a very good idea. So we see some companies that are also trying to do what we do. Luckily, we are fairly ahead of them, I would say, in the tech. Which doesn't mean that our device is right now completely finalized. We're still in development of some parts, but we're actually conducting on a daily basis currently about 1,500 measurements in our research lab. And we see that it's fairly going to the right direction, and we are pretty confident that we can deliver the result quality that the farmer would need to then ultimately he doesn't need to send in anything anymore.
That sounds super cool. And it's a relatively small device, right? So do you mind going a bit into the technology of it and explaining how it works, how a relatively small thing can do the same thing as a lab, pretty much?
Yeah, of course. So basically, the device that you've seen last time, it has changed a little bit. It's a bit bigger now, but it's From a size perspective, you can. It's about the size of a shovel, I would say. So, and it looks kind of like a shovel. So, if you go to our website, you can see that it's basically a stick that you can that has a sensor head at the bottom that you can push into the soil. So, what we are doing, and not going too deep into our IP because it's still fairly also under the radar, I would say. So what we're doing in a high-level description is we are fusing different measurement principles in a very dense area together. So basically, in coming back to the complexity of the soil itself, there's so many parameters in the nutrients, and there's other material like stones, like worms, like everything is coming together in the soil, which makes it extremely complex to measure. And if you, for example, only take one kind of sensor, you will have extreme offsets and chaotic offsets in the end that you cannot calculate out anymore. So what we are doing is we are combining different measuring principles that in part have some overlapping results, that we actually create a autonomously calibrating sensor fusing system that is then funneling a very broad wavelength spectrum into our cloud that we then analyze, and as a secondary information, we then come to the nutrients, for example, or other parameters. So it's a multiple steps and fairly complex system in itself, and this is what makes it exciting. Also, I would say, because it's on different levels we're facing. On the one hand side, large challenges. But on the other hand side, if we can solve them, it's a super great advantage for the parties involved.
And do I understand correctly? So you develop obviously the device and also the software that goes with it that then the farmers use, or who would use the software?
We develop both. So to be fair, not every sensor component that we use is developed by us, because that doesn't necessarily make any sense. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel in every regard. So, but on the other side, we also actually develop sensor components ourselves that are not existing in the way that we would need that in regards to robustness, for example. So, if you would just take a pH electrode, just as an example, that's currently a glass electrode. If you want to put that in the agricultural space, and where the handling might be a bit robust, and there's stones in the ground and everything, so this is completely not usable in that vertical. So we are obviously aiming our sensor system to be extremely robust, and therefore also developing our own sensor components. The software is also developed by us in the end, because there's nothing that we could use as a starting point for that, or source the software from third parties, because that's so new that there's not really a basis around that. I mean, of course, we do use stuff like mapping from Google, stuff like that we don't have to develop. But in terms of all of the data models and the soil models and the models for the plant biology, that's all developed by us in our team.
So we'll get back to the technology and the startup a little bit more later, but I kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit and kind of ask you about you, because you yourself, I mean, you sound pretty young. You don't sound like a very old farmer. So I kind of want to know how you got into agriculture technology.
So coming to agriculture completely by accident, I would say. So I have no relation to agriculture before that whatsoever.
So no hands-on farming experience whatsoever.
Yeah. But, sometimes you don't need that to create innovation for a space and have some fresh eyes on a problem that someone would say, okay, we have done this forever, it's okay, but it's actually not okay. So even though coming from a more rural area in Germany where agriculture is more of a topic, like I said, no relations to agriculture before the company. But all of the skill set that one would need in what we're doing here at the company I've done in multiple occasions at other startups that were VC-backed with large funding rounds at consulting firms for optimizing processes in large NASDAQ-listed companies to digitization consulting for corporates here in Berlin also. So there we actually have been spinning off startups for them, creating the teams, setting up the structure, setting up the operations, setting up marketing, setting up sales. So all of that you would need for creating a business. So this knowledge was there, I would say. So coming then to the agricultural space, which is turns out an extremely interesting space, and the interest in that is just getting larger every day. Because if you look at the macro trends of the growth of population, and if you really look into what's actually happening in agriculture, where you can just shake your head sometimes, because in the end, the 10 billion people that will live on the planet in 2050, they will have to eat something, right? And there's actually right now, there's already more than 800 million people undernourished on the planet, and this will just get worse. And if we don't create technology around that, we're on a very bad path, I would say, and that's a really exciting topic to work on, technology that will actually help solving a real world problem. And that's just, like I said, an extremely exciting thing. And working in food and agritech is just very fulfilling also. So it's not just the technology that we create that's super exciting, but also creating something that can have a real value down the line, and that's pretty cool.
I can imagine that. And are there plans? Because right now you're based in Berlin, and you're, from what I understand, that's also your market, right? Germany and maybe a bit beyond that. Are you looking at developing countries or potentially bringing your technology to parts of the world that might need it the most?
In the midterm, definitely. So the technology will probably have to change a little bit for that. So our core focus right now is actually Western Europe, but also USA and in Asia is extremely interesting to us. But actually, developing countries is an extremely big part, I would say, of the overall picture. Because if we're speaking about the infrastructure of laboratories here, and it's just taking too long, and the result is not good enough. That problem is completely different in developing countries, because they don't even have a laboratory to send something to, And if you can make them independent of this non-existent infrastructure and give them something into their hands to really efficiently cultivate what they have, then that's a pretty cool thing. But this will probably not be a huge revenue driver, but it doesn't necessarily have to, I would say, because also want to help in other countries that are maybe not as advanced yet, but they can have a real big impact on them too.
Maybe to go back again to you and to your background, can you tell us a bit more about, so you came to agriculture by accident almost, and you mentioned a bit already what you worked in before, but do you want to give us an idea of your educational background and also what jobs, companies you had before Stenon?
Absolutely. So I'm an industrial engineer by studies. So a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in industrial engineering. There's not a really good translation actually to what it actually is. You can call it business engineering. There's a term for that in German called Wirtschaftsingenieurwesen, so it's not really existent in English. I've basically chosen this path, which is now already a bit back in the day, but I wanted to be in between business and tech. So I was always really interested in technologies, but I was maybe not as talented in stuff that I would have to know there. I always wanted to focus more on the business side of things, but also having a good understanding of what's actually happening in technology. And I think now looking back, this was a pretty good decision, but because if you only do the business part, you might not really understand what's happening on the technology side. and vice versa. So studied that in my bachelor's. Afterwards, I went to a consultancy that was focused on process engineering, process optimization, and there I was in projects in Germany, in France, in Switzerland, for smaller companies, for larger companies, for really optimizing their product flow and their manufacturing sites, for making stuff more efficient, for reducing waste, stuff like that, which was a really great learning, I would say, because you really have to understand how processes work, how a manufacturing plant works, how you can reduce bottlenecks, stuff like that. Really interesting. But in the end, you always take small steps, which was not really not interesting, but I saw myself somewhere else. I wanted to create more leaping steps and greater technologies, I would say, which I then chose to go to Berlin, also do a master's degree in industrial engineering, more focused again on the business side, and get into the startup scene where really disruptive technology is created at the end of the day. And I went to a travel tech startup, into the business development team first, and I've really seen how a great company is created and how a company is growing on the one hand side based on the demand of the market, on the other side financed by venture capital, which I had not seen before that. So if you come from a small area, southwest in Germany, you have no touch points to venture capital at all. So this was really interesting. And actually out of that company was a spin-off created that was taking the technology that was used in the first company and brought into other verticals, which was also extremely interesting, and had some amazing growth in that team as well. We had a nice team structure in itself, but I wanted to kind of combine the knowledge of the startup and of the corporate consulting into one, and this is why I went to my next job in the digitization consultancy, where this was really brought together. So we had basically the startup mindset of trying, iterating, testing things, going to market, failing, and then iterating into something that really works, combined with the knowledge I had from consulting to corporates and what the issues is with that, reporting to the board, and slow processes and stuff like that. So this was a really good combination of the learnings I had until then. This is why I chose to go there. And then ultimately, which led to the founding of our company, is that a friend reached out to me via our network, or our together network, or shared network, and said, "Hey, I'm working on a technology for analyzing soil." And I was like, "Okay, sure, we can look into that." And the initial idea of that was actually to validate or to find out if there's anything behind that. So the intention when we started talking about this was not even, okay, we're going to found a company together in a few months and raise a bunch of money and try to make this work. This was really just, is there something or is there not something? So Niels, my co-founder, and actually turned into my best friend. He's a really great guy. Technology, it's like, it's a super romantic story. Amazing, that's amazing. No, we sat together, and like he was just the smartest guy I've ever talked to in regards to sensitive development and technology. I was really amazed by that, and we've looked into what he's developed so far, and we wanted to see if there's a market for that, or if that's just a nice-to-have technology that would not make any difference down the line. And when we looked into that, we just seen on the one side, just like extremely old-fashioned way how it's done today, compared with a huge demand in the market to actually change that. And that combined with a path of a technology that we've seen that we can actually solve this problem was so exciting that we've decided to basically quit our jobs and start the company, which was in retrospect, absolutely insane, I would say, but now it's the right decision. And we started the company, bootstrapped it for a while, which is very hard in a sensor space or hardware environment because you need a lot of money to even create a prototype. And we went to an accelerator first, got some initial funding from them, which was not a lot, but kept us alive and kept us going. And then we found investors that believed in our technology and our team and what we are planning to do. And we've grown to about 10 people now and going strong, I would say.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I'm very impressed. It's a very nice story. You also got a best friend out of it, so that's lovely. And did I understand correctly that you're also hiring? I see some open positions on your website. How is that going?
Yeah, so we are hiring. So if anyone's hearing the podcast and is interested in joining this rocket ship, feel free to reach out to me directly or via our application site or career site. So we are still focused on technologies in hiring. So everything from front-end developers, back-end developers, also data engineers. We're actively looking for these people and looking for the best of the best, like everybody is. But we're also looking to hire into marketing and sales and operations within the next 3 to 4 months, I would say. We're also looking to raise another round of money within this year in summer. So if there's any investors who might be interested in that, please also feel free to reach out to me because we are really seeing the parameters taking in the right direction in any regard. And therefore, we've decided with our current investors to make the round of financing earlier than we actually wanted to. And we aim to hire maybe about 10 people in the next 6 months.
Wow. How old is your startup?
Not even a year. So we founded the company in April 2018, but we've worked on it prior to that. So from a legal perspective, we are not even a year old, but I would say in total we've been working on this for, I don't know, more than a year. But it's still fairly young.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so yes, what's been the most challenging aspect for you and for Stenon in the last, say, year that you've been active?
Yeah, well, I think there's challenges every day, but it's also exciting to tackle them. But starting with financing of the company, which is out of our own pockets, would of course not have been possible at all. So finding investors was of course a big step to take, and there's huge competition for the funds for financing seed rounds and getting the first steps in, and especially if you have a hardware company. Well, actually, I see it as a data company, not as a hardware company, but still you have some hardware component in that. Which most of the VCs or investors drop out because their thesis is based around software. Then you're playing in an agricultural space, which in Germany might not play a big role as mobility or automation, maybe of production, stuff like that. So we had a lot of stuff that was going against us, but luckily we were able to find amazing investors, a VC called Atlantic Labs, and some private investors that help us in any regard. Very, very great people and very great investors. So this was a huge challenge to start with. And then a big challenge is actually finding the right people to pull this off, which we have also been quite successful with. But it's a huge challenge to, get the people on board, get the right people on board, and in the speed that you need them. When you're in competition with the Zalandos and Facebook of the world, where everybody wants to work. So for a very small company, that's always hard. And then, of course, technical challenges. It was even a challenge to get an office if you don't. If you're not like a company that has been existing for 10 years and has a solid revenue stream. So every day is a fight, but it's an awesome fight, and it's very exciting, and it's a lot of fun. But it's also a up and down roller coaster. So
Yeah, for sure.
Let's think about the future now. What do you think the company will look like in, let's say, a year from now?
it's a good question. So we plan to go to market with like in January 2020. So we're still completely under development. We do have some live test farms that are using our technologies, but it's not in a sales mode yet, I would say. So in a year, we are on the market, probably in Germany, France, and Ukraine. Why those markets? Because we already have some distribution partners in that market. I would assume that we are have grown a lot again, have some substantial revenues. And at the end of the day, are making farmers happy, which is the biggest part of it, and really helping them on their cultivation. And it's hard to predict what happens in a year, or in 5 years, or in 10 years. It's certainly impossible. But we will be on the market. We will have substantial share in the whole system, and we will be an amazing company.
For sure.
Of course.
Okay, so if we were to sum up most of the things that we've covered so far, what would you say the top 2 or top 3 things that Stenon needs right now are?
One part would be the people. So a lot of great talent that can come join our company and come help us to achieve our goals. So we need a lot more of those. Second thing would be, I've mentioned that we are doing a new round of funding within this year. So if, like I said, investors want to reach out, we're happy to speak with them. And then the third part really is partnerships. So that can be in any regard, from production partnerships for helping us creating or producing the first units, to sourcing components, to getting the supply chain in order. I mean, we do have already some partners that we speak to, but the deal on those regards not closed yet. So we're happy to speak in that regard. So in conclusion, it's people, it's funding, and it's partnerships that we're looking for. And if anyone is interested in learning more about that, or feels that one of the 3 points might fit for a conversation, everybody can go to our website. That's Stenon.io, or reach me directly via Dominic Roth at Stenon.io, also findable on the website, or I'm assuming that you will put the contract in the show notes also. And happy to pick up conversations.
Yes. To all who are listening, you can find Stenon's website and email in the description. Thank you so much for speaking with us today, Dominic.
It was wonderful to have you, and super interesting. I don't think we knew so much about Agritech before.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Hope that we get some interest raised in people, and it was really fun talking to you and sharing our story and sharing infos about the company. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Thanks for listening to Startup the Science.
If you like our show and want to know more about what we do, check out our website at inam.berlin.
And don't forget to leave us a review. Until next time.